Well, it's so great to see so many people throwing their hat into the ring to represent our students and teachers and the Board of Education. Janie Monier is another one of those, and I'm excited to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak to you, answer questions, and introduce myself and let people know who I am and that I'm running and why I'm running as well.
Yeah, I think, and that's a great place to start, kind of with the how things are going in education. It seems like a tumultuous time to throw your hat in the ring. What made you or encouraged you to decide now is the time that you should run?
There were a couple things. One, I was asked, right? So someone asked me about running, and I do have a little bit of a bubble hand volunteering for things. So I said, let me think about it. And I talked to my family, my boys who are both in elementary school, talked to some other folks in the community, other parents, and kind of looked to see what was going on. And I have a background as a nurse. I have had both my parents have disabilities, so I'm used to having to interpret, negotiate, and advocate on that side of things. And I'm invested in these schools that my boys are going to be in through elementary, middle, and high school, and seeing them and their friends and everybody succeed as well as they can, right? So I said, you know what? Let me do it. I'll put my hat in the ring. We'll see how it goes. It's a board where you need 4 out of 3 people to get anything done. So it's based on consensus and collaboration, which is a space that I prefer to be in.
Yeah, look, I think that was one big question that a lot of parents asked is how we're going to get anything done, because it has seemed up to now either to be very one-sided or, trying to get people to work together. I think it would be nice to show that support, I think, for the parents and the students and representing all, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, what do you feel are the top 3 priorities for Frederick County Public Schools? If you were to get elected, these are kind of like, yes, we need to tackle these right away.
So the first one, I think, is the one that's on a lot of people's brains at the moment, is the budget, right? So Frederick County is in a unique position, being 8% growth on average year after year since 2020. No other county really comes close. The closest is about 2.8% from Carroll, and then Anne Arundel is hot on their heels. So the amount of growth that we've had and the fact that our funding formula from the state just never has kept up with that enrollment growth as well from those families moving here, that puts our budget and that $49 million shortfall that we're seeing this year as a really the biggest thing that we need to tackle to make sure that any other of the ideas that we have, wanting to have special education funded appropriately and so that it is safe and that families get the resources they need, to have mental health, advocates in the schools. So COVID really stressed out families, it stressed out the kids, and we're still dealing with a lot of that today. So in order to do any of that, we need to have a budget and to have CTC expanded so that we have expanded opportunities for what success means for our kids. Not every kid is going to want to go to college. That's not necessarily the best environment for everybody, but they will thrive in a CTC environment, whether it's CAD, GIS, architecture, auto mechanics, landscape, all of the things. So, I really want those opportunities for my kids and, everybody else's families as well, and across the county, making sure that we have equity of those resources across the county. So, and again, to do all of that, that means funding. That is going to be like the biggest thing that we're going to have to tackle.
So your suggestion is that we need to get, so are we not getting the same amount of money that other districts are getting per student? Or you're just saying because we're growing so fast that we're always behind?
The growth is so fast, and the funding formula is relying on enrollment numbers that are already a year behind. So if by September 30th you have 100 students enroll, but by March 30th that's up to 1,000, well, now we're already behind in those enrollment numbers that are factored in for the next year.
Yeah, and so how do we fix that? Because do you go based on projected? Do you go based on housing developments? How do you go to the state and say, look, this is what's happening, and or do you do quarterly? You know what I mean? Almost like, I don't know what the solution is there.
Oh, it's a multi-pronged solution, right? And like I said, the Board of Education is advocacy and policy, right? So they have their limitations as well. But that policy advocacy piece is important. The fact that we can talk to families, collaborate with each other, advocate with one another to the state, work with each other to partner with one another, get away from that sort of partisan idea of the schools. All of the public schools and charter schools are in the same boat. Everybody is going to be affected by these budget cuts. So if we really want everybody in our county to have success, our kids to have success once they graduate high school, it's important that we work together to advocate to the county and to the state about changing that funding formula to really accurately reflect what we're seeing here. And it's going to be happening in other counties. So they're going to have to address this eventually elsewhere.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. I think that is something they should have really figured out, because this is not the first time this problem has happened. Certainly not even in our own county, but I can't even imagine across the state it's the first time. Talking about the budget, and, I think one of the big concerns for a lot of the people who are running for Board of Education, as well as parents, is this lack of people wanting to be teachers. So they're, even having the choice, or the candidate pool is shrinking. Do you have any ideas on how we can increase the help that teachers need within the schools immediately, and then maybe an idea of what we can do down the road?
So I'm glad you asked it in that way, because there are more actionable things we can do. I'm a PTA president here, and we have a really solid core of volunteers that go into the schools and into the classrooms to help with reading, honestly, to help with math, just support for the students in some really simple ways. And that's going to be needed more than ever next year, as classroom sizes are going to get bigger. May 15th, they're going to be deciding on what they can do for staff allocation of funds. And that's going to, every school and teacher, support staff, and everybody's going to be looking at that to see, and kind of down the road, what's going to happen in the next school year. Are they going to be in the same school? Are they going to be moved somewhere else? So we are going to see classrooms get bigger. There's other things I'm going to be looking into in terms of short-term little certifications, whether it's a literacy certification that a parent can get, or a mental health advocate certification, something they can do in the short term over the summer to help be in the classroom, to really, use that expertise they'll learn in that certification to help their teachers out and to help those students out. Because again, we are in this together. And I think we can't say that enough, right? That no one is being singled out. All of these schools and all of our students are going to be in the same boat. And in the long term, is that continued advocacy with the county and with the state to change those funding formulas and allocations of funds. And then looking at what our unfunded mandates are, and how can we fix that and not make it so that what we're looking at right now that has to be cut because everything else has to be funded, are things like, the teachers, their compensation, sports, arts and music, one-to-one technology, transportation. So all of these things, that's what's on the table. We can't change inflation.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
So, and then Frederick County has a wonderful community of nonprofit organizations as well that can help step in. But that's not a long-term solution.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I do think, you kind of have to look today, and you got to look a year and 3 and 5 years down the road, to try to have these solutions in place before it's too late. Yeah. I was reading an article that said the kids graduating Frederick County high schools, 30% are not college or career ready. Do you have any ideas on what we might be able to do to remedy this? Obviously, that doesn't coincide directly with having more teachers or more staff, kind of in the system that we're in now. What can we do to help kids make sure they're ready once they graduate?
Some of that is expanding those options for different learning opportunities, where we talk about the LINKS program. I know they're looking at how can we expand that to other schools and not just Frederick High School. CTC and CTE in our classrooms, expanded opportunities for kids, and then really assessing where's that 30% really coming from? Is it related to certain schools and certain dynamics, or are we talking about that is the curriculum, that's happening inside the classroom? Really, a context to every other county in the state, Frederick does very well for our students in terms of our graduation rates and students going to college and other careers after high school. That doesn't mean there's not room for improvement. Of course, we're only human. So, and then eventually we're going to have more staff. We're talking about retaining and, recruiting more teachers. Even if we had every education program at all of our colleges filled with teachers who are ready to come into our schools, we still would not have enough teachers to staff all of our schools. We have to also look outside Pennsylvania, Virginia, and actually across the country. Our HR department, FCPS, is looking everywhere to find folks who are willing to move this way. So some of it is like, why come here versus any of the 49 of the other states? So, and some of that is teacher autonomy. We rank 49th in teacher autonomy, right above Florida. Some of that is the degree of assessment. Are assessments actually adequately assessing our students? What are they really assessing for? Many times the assessments that they're doing is not just grade level. They're looking to see if they have 1 or 2 grade levels above where they are. So that student that might be 1 or 2 grade levels behind now looks to be further behind. And we're not necessarily, taking teachers into account who are really bringing those students up. If they bring them up a grade level, that's fantastic. We need to recognize and honor and celebrate that as well.
Yeah. Many parents asked about policy 443. I think that's kind of the hot button issue this election. What is your stance on that policy?
For me, the policy stands as it is. It is really about recognizing the world doesn't always look like the families we have in our home, right? So our public school kids, charter school kids, everybody's going to go out into this world, graduate, and be, meeting new people who are going to tell them, hey, my pronouns are different, or, whatever, my religion isn't something that they're familiar with, whatever it is. Some of this is about respect and boundaries, and just recognizing those boundaries for one another. And it doesn't change how I live my life, doesn't change how someone else lives their life. It's just respect for one another and those boundaries.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think one of the parents, and again, I think a lot of candidates kind of answer in that way. And I think a lot of people, it doesn't even matter where you stand. We want everyone to feel included and welcome. I think the issue comes into play with sports in particular, and the overnight camps in particular. I think those things are making parents a little uncomfortable, or getting people on edge about, is my daughter going to lose a spot to somebody that might have been born biologically male? I think those are the things that parents bring up. Do you have any, feedback on those two things in particular?
When I hear that, some of the things that I want to know more about is like, what are those actual numbers in Frederick County? We also have girls that play on football teams at times, right? Whether they're a kicker or they're quarterback, whatever they're doing, what position. And I know we just opened up flag football for women as well, for our girls in high school. So I don't, I remember Don Staley made this a comment about there's only 44 students in the NCAA to whom this would apply, and there's like over 200,000 players. So sometimes we need to look at what are proportionally in the context of things. I don't see that happening in Frederick County. I don't see anyone losing a position. I don't think people would want that to happen to anyone. Everyone wants an opportunity for their child to play sports and to be involved with their schools. So.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Another question that parents wanted to know is the books that are in our libraries. What is the process for that now, and do you feel that it's adequate?
So they did have a review of books last year. There was 35 books that were asked to be reviewed. 1 was banned, and 2, maybe 3, that were moved to a different grade out of 35. So that's fine. They reviewed them. That was a consensus that would come to. That is a process that's in place. They've also added an extra step where now the program they use to help, select books for their school library is now something that parents can use to say, I don't want my kid to read, XYZ book, whatever it is that they're uncomfortable with. That's just something that the media specialist, librarian, and the volunteers, I don't people are familiar with how many volunteers are in our media centers, because our librarians and our media specialists are wearing a lot of hats, doing a lot of jobs. So it needs to be something that a volunteer can easily say, oh, hey, this student, the parent doesn't want them to have this. That's okay. Let's go pick out another book about sports or whatever it is that the student was interested in. So, that I think is a great compromise, because then that family can make a decision for themselves as a family, and it's not necessarily imposed on everybody else. We also hire media specialists and librarians who have master's degrees in child development, and they're experts in that field. And so I really, even as a nurse, I know how often we're asked to take on extra degrees and extra certifications. And so I can understand how it can feel, we got these degrees, we understand our scope of practice and our expertise, so let us practice that, right? And have some trust and respect in the process a little bit.
Yeah, well, I do agree that parents need to be involved and advocate for what they want for their kids, and know that that is a choice they can make, for their family. And that's important to be able to have that. Another big thing that came up in the questions was about drugs on school campus. Parents who have spent time in the school, who smell marijuana, especially at athletic events. I know I've been at the gate of some athletic events, and, it's very apparent. What are your thoughts on where the Board of Ed can support the schools on what needs to happen there?
So some of that's going to be looking at those policies, right? And seeing do they need to be revised? Do they need to be stiffened up? Do we need to have more guidance? So as the board puts together policies, it's the superintendent who creates the regulations, right? So we don't want to step on toes. We can't make that, determination, but we can put policies in place about, what's happening on our campuses, who can come in and make those, can investigate and say, hey, what's going on in this bathroom, or what's going on around the corner here? Parents are not necessarily always going to want to feel like they have to do that. They're there to watch their kid, either play in the sport, or I was on flags in my high school. So, my parents would come and watch me during halftime, right? So, people are there to be entertained and to watch their kids play, and not, have to be exposed to all of that. And there are already county and city ordinances regarding all of that. So that comes into play with policy and making sure that it's in alignment with what the needs are and what's happening with that particular community. Again, when there's concerns happening, it's always important to go back to that community to find out the details, right? Because it may be a little bit different than another community. So I don't want to just make a blanket statement about everybody.
Yeah, no, I agree. Cell phones in classes. Some parents are saying that it is interruptive and disruptive for their students when other kids are on their phones during class. Do you feel like there is any policy that FCPS should make in that, or should this be left to the teachers or the schools? What should happen there?
So I know they've been looking at that and trying to come to some sort of consensus about policy. Some of it does depend on the class. So is disruptive in a science, math, English class where you're having a lot of discussion and you need to pay attention to the teacher and what the other students are saying. But there have been, for instance, an art teacher who will say, look, they know what their project is. They're working on it for multiple days. If putting on earbuds to listen to music is helpful to keep them focused, then that's acceptable to me. If it's not, then I want to be able to, regulate that and be able to go to them and say, hey, we gotta do something different here. So, how do we as a policy make sure that we have a little bit of flexibility and to recognize that not every class is the same, and how students, need to be in that class is not the same between an art class, music class, and say like a math or science.
Yeah, agree. I found out recently with special education, and I know that that's a whole topic too, and I'd like you to touch a little bit on the special education program and what you feel can be implemented to make that revamp it, turn it upside down, or whatever needs to happen for those families. But that dyslexia is not a we have a dyslexia advocate who's actually a private business owner who has to advocate for dyslexia. And that surprised me a little bit because dyslexia has been around for so long. And I do know FCPS a few years ago kind of started a department downtown to address dyslexia. So I guess really all encompassing the special education question, what do you feel needs to happen to help kids who need the help?
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up dyslexia in particular. That's something that your parents in my community have often come to me saying, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find out if I can get an IEP for my child who I think has dyslexia, but I'm struggling with being on the same page as the school, whether it's the staff or the teacher, the administrator. That communication piece has just not really been happening. So, one side may think that they got all the boxes ticked and everything was great, and the parent goes home feeling like, wow, don't feel like I got heard. I got any of my questions answered. And it's actually a question I did bring up to the superintendent during a PTA superintendent chat that we had. And one of the things that she said that they're doing next year, they're looking to have to help, and we'll see. Partly it is to have a handbook that is separate from just the general handbook, but a handbook for special education. So you can go in there as a parent and more easily find the information you need on how to advocate and get through, this with your school. Also, you can have an advocate, everybody is entitled to have an advocate with them to help navigate it because it can be complicated. There's a lot of teams involved in an IEP or a 504, anything that you're trying to do with the school. And then the other piece of it is to have more professional development. Like, so if we're having miscommunications, one side thinks that everything's being communicated correctly, and the other says, no, I didn't get any of my questions answered. Obviously, something's not happening here. So there has to be a bit more, perhaps, professional development to revisit what can we do and what can we not do? Because FCPS doesn't have the ability to do everything, right? So there are times when we have to say, I'm sorry, this is not a service we have here, but there are private individuals who can help provide this service for you. And this is how you find them, or, we can provide the service, but maybe not the school. We have to figure out how to do it elsewhere. So it's a complicated question. And dyslexia is definitely one of those things I know we see in our community trying to get help for. One of the concerns I have about this budget and increased class sizes and the fact that special education is just so underfunded is that we're not getting kids the resources they need, getting families the information they need, because we're waiting until there's a crisis. There's no other choice to really wait until there's a crisis because we just can't get those resources available to folks.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, I think it's kind of, when you talk about the cut of the budget, you just know that some of these things are going to go on the back burner, and you just feel for those families who are kind of stuck at that point.
Yeah, which makes the communication piece that much more important.
Yes,
Bring in
for
your PTA, I would say. Bring in your PTA folks to help you, because also you're not the only one that's had the same question, the same struggle. So a lot of times finding those community resources and allies can really help you navigate all of that.
Yes. And I agree with, doing more public-private partnerships with people in the community who have the time and want to do it. So that I think that's one of the great solutions. Okay, well, I think that is the end of the questions that the parents had. So I would love to give you the floor, so to speak, and really just let voters know why they should mark your name, Janie Monier, for Board of Education next week.
So for me, what I bring to the board is that parent perspective, but also as a registered nurse, I bring in the health perspective. And in my own personal background, understanding what it means to have to be that advocate and interpreter and negotiator for two parents who are disabled, how we negotiate with the hospitals and how we negotiate with schools to make sure that we're getting the services that we need. And I've been an advocate through the PTA for families and schools and making sure we get funding, universal meals, this sort of thing, because every school in our district has different needs and different targeted communities that need, maybe it's universal meals in one area, maybe it's transportation to CTC in another area. All of this is important. So it's important that we have equity of all of these resources to, across the county based on what those communities say they need, not a top-down solution, but a bottom-up solution to these problems. And one of the things I love about Frederick County is how much we do love and support through whether it's our nonprofit organizations, or once we find out something's going on, say Brunswick High School needs to be replaced, a few years ago. Once folks hear about that, it's like, oh my gosh, how can I help them? Right. So some of this is also about communication and collaboration and making sure that parents and families get as much information as often as we can possibly do it. So that there's time to hear it, process it, and give feedback before we have plans put in place, whether we're building a new school, refurbishing, plans for special education, whatever it is. And as a nurse and as a parent and a PTA president, those are the things that I have been doing my whole life. And so I want to bring that in that perspective to the board.
Well, I think that those are all great things, and we wish you all the luck on the 14th as you take this next journey. But really, if nothing else, for stepping up and actually doing this, I can't even imagine how that whole process has been. So really, I just want to thank you for doing it, for all the parents here, for at least just putting your hat in the ring. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I love seeing what you're doing with Good Morning Frederick and sharing it with everybody. So
I
support,
know.
like, and share her YouTube channel, y'all.
Yes. Well, I appreciate that very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.